We're now at day 9 in Diddy's trial. Inside a crowded courtroom in Manhattan, the center of a huge music industry scandal, something no one expected happened again. The court had already heard from big names, Cassie, Will Smith, Monique, but then suddenly, Ice Cube entered the room, and everything changed. He didn't come to show off. He wasn't looking for attention.
He walked in with a clear goal, holding a folder in his hands. Inside it were links, names, recordings, and papers that made the entire room freeze. At that moment, everyone realized this wasn't only about Diddy. What Q brought up pointed to something bigger, a system that didn't just shield power, it used it. A structure built on silence, driven by fear, and made to reward obedience. This wasn't about being famous. It wasn't even about money. It was about keeping control.
And once you stopped playing along, you weren't just pushed away. You were completely erased. For years, people whispered names: Jamie Foxx, Oprah Winfrey, Quincy Jones. Now those whispers came with real proof. And Cube was the one putting it out there. Journalists barely had time to understand what was happening. Cameras flashed, papers shuffled. Diddy's lawyers tried to stay calm. Then, suddenly, the courtroom doors opened. Ice Cube stepped in, eyes fixed straight ahead. Like he had waited for this moment for a long time. The room tensed up instantly. Some jurors sat up straighter, eyes focused. Even the judge paused for a second, clearly surprised. When Diddy looked up and saw who
he sounded like a man who had kept a secret for too long and was finally ready to speak. He looked right at the jury and said, "Some of you didn't realize I wasn't part of their inner group. That's what made them mad." The room went still. What came next didn't just shake the courtroom. It tore down a false image that had protected the powerful for decades. Cube started talking about the club, a hidden group in the industry that no one talks about. But everyone knows is real. The ones smiling at red carpet events, making quiet deals behind closed doors. They aren't your friends, Cube told the jury. They bring you in to take control of you. And if you push back, that's when the trouble starts. He looked straight at Diddy, who was clearly rattled. They cancel your meetings, Cube said. They spread lies about you. They start rumors. They make silent moves you never hear about, but you feel them.
Cube said he watched this happen for years. Real talents, good people, welcomed into a golden circle, offered success, then told what to do. Told to sign, to smile, to pretend. And if they refused, they didn't just lose work, they vanished. Cube said it plain. Diddy wasn't just part of this circle. He was running it. The jurors leaned closer. The courtroom got quiet. Even the judge looked like he needed a moment to take it in. He leaned forward and asked Cube, "Do you need a break?" Cube didn't blink. He shook his head, looked back at the jury and said, "You want to know why I'm here? Because they tried to destroy someone I respect, Jamie Foxx." And then came the next secret. And this was just the beginning. One celebrity after another started stepping forward, and the chaos was only beginning. Reporters stopped typing, heads turned. Cube explained how it always begins. Kindness, invitations, fancy parties, strange calls from people you never thought would contact you.
Jamie was rising fast. His skills were clear, and that's when they noticed him. It starts with a compliment, Cube said. Then they ask for little things. Then it turns into control. Cube told the court that Jamie spoke to him in private, with fear in his voice. They treat you like family, Cube said, but only if you follow the rules. And if you don't, silence becomes your answer. Cube talked about those well-known basketball parties, the black SUVs, no phones allowed, and unusual guests. It wasn't about basketball, he said. It was a test. Who would follow? Who would ask questions? And who would stay loyal? Jamie stayed polite, smiled, played along, but he never gave in fully. And that's when things started to shift. Suddenly, Jamie was seen as difficult. Suddenly, people questioned his health. His name disappeared from movie news and started showing up in shady gossip stories. Cube said that medical emergency in 2023, it wasn't just about health.
It was a warning, but he didn't stop there. Cube said Diddy's group didn't only throw parties, they recorded them. They kept videos. They collected proof. People had no idea they were being filmed, but they were. And once they had the footage, they never let it go. Cube told the court that Jamie called him once after one of those nights. He didn't say much, but what he said sent chills. Cube, I can't talk about it, but I can't forget it either. And just when the courtroom couldn't get any quieter, Cube said another name, Oprah. It wasn't just Puff, he said. This goes way deeper. He explained that right before Jamie's big Oscar moment after Ray, just as he was rising, he got a call. It was Oprah. But she wasn't calling to cheer him on. She told Jamie, "You're messing things up." Jamie was shocked. He thought she was calling to support him.
But instead, she told him to get it together and said she'd connect him with someone who could guide him. That person was Quincy Jones. Cube said he didn't need to explain who Quincy was. Everyone in the business already knew. He said on the surface, Quincy's a legend, but behind the scenes, he's feared. Oprah took Jamie to Quincy's house, but it wasn't a party. It wasn't advice. It was something completely different. Jamie told Cube it was one of the weirdest nights of his life. He said it didn't feel like support. It felt like preparation, like he was being trained for something. Cube said Jamie never fully explained what happened that night. But the look in his eyes when he tried to tell him, that said enough. Oprah called it responsibility, Cube said. Quincy called it legacy. But what they gave him was more like a leash. After that night, Jamie started changing. Not because he wanted to, but because he had no choice.
Cube remembered Jamie once said, "The only way to stay in this game is to fake it." And Cube said he watched him fake it for years. But now, no one is pretending anymore. Cube leaned back in his chair, calm and serious. Then he said it clearly. Quincy Jones isn't just a music producer. He's the top man. The whole courtroom froze. Cube looked at the judge and said, "This isn't gossip. It's real, and it needs to be heard." He described Quincy as someone who gets praised in public, but feared in private. His power didn't just come from talent, Cube said. It came from what he had on people. You don't get that strong without making deals, Cube said. And I'm not talking about music deals. I'm talking about something much deeper. He explained that Jamie wasn't taken to Quincy by chance. That meeting was planned. It was one person handing him off to another. Jamie told Cube that wasn't advice. That was instruction.
According to Cube, Quincy made it look like he was mentoring him. But Jamie saw the truth. It felt like I was being processed, Jamie said. Not helped, processed. And Jamie wasn't the only one. Cube said he'd heard similar stories from other men in the industry. Men with talent who disappeared. Men who had public breakdowns. Men who changed their image overnight and were never the same. Quincy may act charming, Cube said, but his message is the same as Diddy's. Do what you're told or you're done. Then Cube shared something even darker. He said he had seen pictures, private ones passed around quietly over the years. Photos that should never exist. In all of them, Quincy was smiling. But the others in those pictures weren't smiling at all. Cube told the court, "I can't prove everything, but I can prove this. Quincy's not just giving advice. He's the link, and whoever he works for, we still don't know their names." Then he stood up straighter.
"You want to know how they keep people quiet?" he asked. "It's not just fear, it's blackmail." Cube said Diddy's strength didn't just come from money. It came from what he had hidden. Recordings, notes, video from parties, hotels, studios, private jets. All saved, all sorted, all used against people. "They don't invite you to party," Cube said. "They record you while you're there." He turned to the lawyers. "You want to know why so many people stay quiet? Ask how many got a flash drive in the mail. Ask how many heard a blocked call with a recording they didn't even remember making. Ask how many careers were destroyed after they said no. And Jamie wasn't the only one." Cube said he knew 2 more actors who got caught up at Diddy's event.
Up until now, Cube had been talking about others. Jamie Foxx, Quincy Jones, the system, the silence. But then he turned the spotlight on himself. "I went to one of those parties," he said. "Only once. It was the early 2000s. There was no formal invite, no flyer, just a time, a name, and a black SUV waiting outside his hotel. They called it a networking night. That's what they always say." Cube said the car drove him into the hills of Hollywood along a winding road. They arrived at a huge mansion in Beverly Hills. As the gates closed behind him, the sound of them locking was louder than expected. At the door, they took his phone. No cameras allowed, but plenty of eyes were watching. Inside, it didn't feel like a celebration. It felt like a trap. The lights were dim, too dim. There was no music, no laughing, no champagne. Just low voices, small groups whispering, and security in every corner, like they were guarding something or someone.
The feeling in the air was wrong. Very wrong. Then there were the rooms. Unmarked doors, some slightly open. Cube said he heard things. Strange sounds. Noises that didn't match what should be happening. And behind some of those doors, things he didn't even want to imagine. He saw faces he recognized. Famous ones. But they didn't look like themselves. Some looked confused. Some looked scared. Some looked like they didn't even know where they were. Then came the moment that changed everything. Cube turned a corner and saw a man he deeply respected. One of the biggest names in the industry, slumped on a couch. His eyes wide open, blank. Across from him, a camera, silently recording. That was enough. Cube left. No questions, no goodbye, no small talk. He got back in the car and stayed completely silent on the ride home. But it didn't end there. The next day, he got a call. No number.
"We saw you leave." Cube told the jury that nothing else followed. No threat, no warning. But he didn't need one. "I got the message," he said, loud and clear. That night stayed with him. It changed the way he looked at everything. The business, the people, the meaning of success. That wasn't a party, Cube told the jury. That was a setup. Then he turned toward Diddy, calm and steady. "You didn't just ruin lives," he said. "You filmed them first." The courtroom went completely quiet. Even Diddy's lawyer, who always jumped to object, was now whispering in his ear. But Diddy didn't move. His face was pale, his jaw clenched, his eyes staring at nothing. Because this time, the cameras weren't under his control. And by now, it didn't feel like a court case anymore. It felt like a confession. Even Diddy's legal team had stopped trying to interrupt. There was nothing left to say, but Cube still wasn't done.
They didn't just try to shut Jamie up, Cube said. They tried to wipe him out completely. He meant every word. Cube explained to the jury that in Hollywood, staying quiet isn't a choice. It's something forced. Not by open threats, but by a slow and steady plan. A method designed to make someone disappear, little by little, without anyone noticing. When Jamie started to pull away from Diddy's circle, things began to fall apart. On purpose. First, the roles stopped coming. Movies he had already been chosen for were suddenly delayed. Meetings got cancelled, one after another. People he had worked with for years suddenly stopped answering his calls. Cube said it didn't feel like chance. He held up a paper, a calendar showing Jamie's scheduled projects from 2019 to 2021. At first glance, it looked like normal industry delays. But then, Cube pointed out something scary. A series of cancelled jobs, all connected to companies linked to Bad Boy, Revolt, or Diddy's other businesses.
He placed the page down quietly, letting it speak for itself. Cube said it didn't stop with work. Next came the whispers, the gossip blogs, stories saying Jamie was unstable, unreliable, losing control. He wasn't falling apart, Cube told the court. He was breaking free, and they didn't like that. Then came the health scare. Cube paused. He looked down for a second, took a breath. "You really think that just happened on its own?" he said softly. "A man in top shape just drops on set right after he starts speaking out about what he saw." He didn't name names, but his words carried a heavy message. "I don't know what happened in that hospital," Cube said, "but I know what fear looks like. I know what revenge feels like, and that wasn't just a health problem. That was a message." Cube said Jamie was offered many chances to come back. Movie deals, press tours, a path to redemption. All he had to do was play along again.
Shake hands, smile, act like nothing had happened. But Jamie said no, and that's when it got worse. That's when they tried to replace him. Cube said that's when the clone talk started. People began asking questions. Was Jamie still alive? Was that even him in the pictures? Why wasn't he seen in public? Cube didn't call it a crazy theory. He called it a plan. That's what they do, he said. They take you apart, piece by piece, until even your fans don't know what's real anymore. Then, Cube lowered his voice again. That's how they keep their control. Not just with fear, but with erasing you. Then Cube looked straight at the jury. His voice got sharper. "This isn't about music," he said. "It's not even about parties. It's about power." He looked each juror in the eye, then turned to the lawyers. "They don't just decide what we hear. They shape what we believe, what we fear, who we trust. Hollywood," he explained, "isn't just a place that makes shows.
It's a system built to take people's pain, their stories, and turn them into products." "You think it's freedom?" he asked. "No, it's all planned. Every song released, every movie backed. It's all controlled." Then Cube said something that made the entire courtroom react. "The same people who promote prison-themed music," he said, "also own the prisons." He told them that's what Tupac tried to warn people about. Before they shut him down, before he got too serious, before he started pointing at the real ones in charge. And just like that, this wasn't a trial anymore. It was a full breakdown of a hidden system. Cube didn't hold anything back. He told the jury those famous parties people talked about weren't really parties. They were places where artists were tested, watched, recorded. Not celebrations, traps. He described how Diddy's gatherings worked. Like secret auditions. If you played along, you were safe. If you pushed back, you were punished.
They were filming people, seeing who would follow the rules and who wouldn't. Cube shared a story about a singer. She had talent, attention, everything going for her. But she said no. She refused to sign with Bad Boy after getting invited. And what happened? Within months, people started calling her difficult. Suddenly, she was seen as hard to work with. Her name stopped showing up at award shows. Her record label dropped her. People stopped returning her calls. Cube looked at the jury and paused. "You think that just happened?" he said. "No, that was payback." Then he said the line that stopped everything in the room. "I kept asking what Diddy did. But the real question is, how many people helped him do it?" And in that moment, the trial shifted. It wasn't just about Diddy anymore. It was about everyone who stayed quiet. Everyone who looked the other way. Everyone who helped keep it all hidden.
The judge leaned back in his seat. The people in the room didn't move. Even the lawyers for the government looked shaken. This wasn't just about one man's wrongdoings. It was about an entire system that helped him get away with it. The judge asked Cube if he had anything else to say. He didn't pause. He stood up slowly, walked to the center of the courtroom, not rushing, not showing off, like each step meant something. He looked Diddy right in the eye. "You built your success using other people's silence," he said. "You called it winning, but it was control." Diddy didn't react. He sat still, pale, jaw tight, eyes staring at nothing. But Cube wasn't done. "You didn't just throw events," he said. "You built cages, emotional ones, mental ones, and filled them with people who thought they were being honored, but were really being used." His voice didn't shake. With every word, it grew stronger. "You broke people," he said. "And then you recorded it."
Then Cube turned toward the crowd. To every artist watching this, every young person dreaming of making it, listen closely. Before they hand you your dream, they'll ask you for something in return. Sometimes it's your voice. Sometimes it's your pride. Sometimes it's everything. He looked around the room, and by the time you figure out what you gave up, it's already gone. Then Cube paused and said something he hadn't said the entire day. "I was scared." The whole room went quiet. I was scared because I knew what I saw, what I heard, what I was invited into. "And I stayed quiet," he said, "because I thought if I didn't speak, they'd leave me alone." He looked at the jury. But silence doesn't keep you safe. It just delays the damage. Then he said it clearly. Silence makes you part of it. He reached into the folder he brought with him and pulled out one photo.
"This was me in 1991, he said, eyes full of hope. "Thought I could make a difference. Thought I could create without losing who I was." He looked at the photo for a moment, then held it high. "That version of me," he said, "he didn't survive." And then he tore the photo in half. But the one standing here today, the one who came to speak, he's not scared of any of you anymore. The room stayed completely silent. Even Diddy's lawyers didn't say a word. The reporters had stopped writing. The jury didn't blink. It didn't feel like a courtroom anymore. It felt like something was ending. Cube walked back to the witness stand. He placed the torn photo on top of his folder, then looked up at the judge. "I don't know what you're going to do with all this," he said. "But now you can't act like you didn't hear it. Now all of you know."
He turned to Diddy one last time. "You thought no one would speak. You thought everyone who knew was buried or bought. But that silence? It's gone now." He stepped down from the stand, didn't stop to look at the press, didn't glance at the jury. He walked straight down the aisle, like a man who had finally let go of the weight he'd been holding for years. And just before he reached the exit, he turned slightly and said, "They didn't take Jamie out. They didn't take me out. They just made us louder." And then he walked out. But what he left behind wasn't just words. It was a warning, a shift, and the beginning of a storm no one in that room would ever forget.